Excepting the technical and trade literature, very little has been written on the world's sugar industry, and yet no commodity of commerce has had a more varied, interesting, and significant history. This volume is intended to convey accurate and readable information on the industry in the different periods and stages of its development. Although it is primarily designed for the general reader, the study is replete with facts and economic deductions which will make it a valuable source of reference in any course on industries or commerce. The exploitation of no other product has so influenced the political history of the Western world. And in the United States, it holds the unique position of having ushered in an era of corporation development and control, unprecedented in the history of the world. We have led the sugar consuming industries, the sugar consuming countries of the earth in the variety of ways in which sugar is used as a staple article of food, and are only exceeded by Great Britain in the per capita consumption. The story of sugar which follows places due emphasis on the conspicuous position of this country, both past and present, as a producer, consumer, and distributor. Naturally, the beet sugar industry receives special consideration from the standpoint of future prospects, since this must be regarded as an infant industry in the light of its rapid growth during the past 2 decades. I acknowledge with thanks the information and suggestions of the following: the State Department of Agriculture and the agricultural experimental stations of the cane and beet growing states, the editors of the Louisiana Planter and the American Sugar Industry and Beet Sugar Gazette, and Professors J. Russell Smith and Walter Sheldon Tower of the University of Pennsylvania. I am personally indebted to my father, Reverend F.D. Surface, for his valuable and painstaking assistance in proofreading. George Thomas Surface, Sheffield Scientific School of Yale University, New Haven, Connecticut, May 1910. The story of sugar, occurrence in nature. The sugars have a wide occurrence in nature and constitute important food for both plants and animals. They are manufactured in green plants from carbon dioxide and water, and contain hydrogen and oxygen in the proportion to form water. Some plants, like the onion, utilize sugar during the period of germination, while others, for example, the beet, consume part of the stored-up sugar in maturing the flower into fertile seeds. Most plants store up starch in the seed, which during the period of germination is converted into sugars for available plant food. There is great variation in the method and amount of sugar manufactured by different plants. Those plants having a conspicuous sugar content are designated as sugar-producing plants, in which it is concentrated chiefly in the fruit, seed, root, or sap. Depending on the species, cane sugar, sucrose, is by far the most abundant of the sugars developed in plants, being the predominant sugar constituent in sugar cane, sorghum, beets, maples, melons, and the various small and orchard fruits. The sugar from the sugar cane, the sugar beet, and the sugar maple are chemically identical as to the chief saccharin, constituents, so that technically all of the sugar consumed as a food in cane sugar, but by common usage and statistical custom, the sugar of commerce is classified as cane, beet, maple, etc. Sugarcane, Saccharum officinarum, was for centuries almost the only source of commercial sugar, but it is now being strongly rivaled by the sugar beet. It is a member of the large family of grasses and may be considered one of the giants of the family, as the stalks frequently attain a height of 15 feet. The other important members of this family are the bamboo, Indian corn, sorghum, the various cereals, and many forage grasses, all of which contain sugar in greater or lesser quantity. Matured sugar. Cane contains by weight an average of 18% cane sugar, 10% cellulose, 70% water, and 1 to 2% mineral matter. The proportions vary with climate, soil, method of cultivation, and the variety selected. There are many varieties of cane which vary widely in size, color of stalk, color and length of leaf, color and quantity of sap, sugar content, rapidity of growth, and in the power to endure. Extremes of temperature and humidity. The roots, as in other grasses, are fibrous, radiate from the lower nodes laterally, and are relatively short, which makes sugarcane easily susceptible to the destruction of storms. The stalk is cylindrical and consists of numerous joints of varying lengths. The leaves are alternate, linear in type, and from 1 to 3 feet long. The leaf clasps the stalk at the node or joint, and immediately under the base of each leaf in the node is a bud encased in a protecting sheath, the external part of which is covered with a plant enamel for protecting this vital part of the plant against extremes of temperature and the ravages of insects. These buds contain a germ capable of propagating an individual plant when the joints are planted. Above each joint is a row of dots or points which extend around the stalk and produce temporary roots when the stalk is planted. Botanists long believed the seed of the cane to be sterile, but in the past few decades, fertile seeds have been developed in many tropical varieties. The percentage of fertile seeds is so small, however, that reproduction by planting the stalks is general in the cane-growing countries. Some varieties do not produce flowers, and in the United States, these are usually preferred since the crop deteriorates less rapidly in case of delay in harvesting. Cane matures about 3 months after flowering, while the sugar beet consumes a part of its sugar content in the process of maturing its seeds. The leaves of cane are shed from the bottom upward until finally the stalk stands naked, except for a few leaves at the upper extremity, and this marks the stage when the crop is ready for harvesting. Sorghum, or Chinese cane, bears a close resemblance to sugarcane in appearance, and in its cultivation requirements. It differs in the perfection of its flowering and in the capacity for seed development, as a result of which propagation by seed planting is almost universal. It also differs in the duration of its growing period. Sorghum maturing in 5 to 6 months, whereas cane requires 9 to 13 months. Sorghum is also better adapted to the climatic conditions of the temperate zone, which gives a larger crop and a more Utilizable sugar content. It has a limited cultivation throughout the United States north of the Gulf states. The sugar content varies from 10 to 13%, but the sugar content varies from 10 to 13%, but the presence of a small percentage of starch and dextrin makes difficult the crystallization of the sugar from the juice. For this reason, the amount of sugar manufactured from sorghum is insignificant, and the crop is utilized for the manufacture of molasses. Indian corn or maize has been used experimentally in the manufacture of sugar. It flourishes throughout the temperate zone where the moisture and soil conditions are favorable, and where the growing season is not less than 5 months' duration. Its habitat closely coincides with that of sorghum and sugar beets. The sugar of the sap begins to decrease with the development of the ear, and it is now suggested by some sugar experimenters that by preventing the formation of the ear, it may become a profitable commercial source of sugar, since the percentage of sugar can be thus increased to about 12%. The bamboo is a sugar-producing plant which was utilized by the ancient peoples of Asia and probably was the first plant from which sugar was extracted. It is not a successful competitor with sugarcane and beets, being lower in sugar and higher in cellulose. The amount of sugar in the bamboo varies widely during the different stages of its growth, as well as in the different species. For centuries, sugar has been manufactured from the different species of palms by the natives of India, Ceylon, Siam, the Malay Peninsula, and the Eastern Archipelago. The wild date palm, Phoenix sylvestris, is the only important producer of date sugar, which, though used by the natives of Bengal centuries ago, did not find its way to the London market until 1793. The first shipment was small, 3,600 weight, and experimental. The total production in Bengal during 1793 was estimated at 10,000 hundredweight. The date palm requires a humid soil and climate and flourishes best in the vicinity of water. The trees are tapped during the first cold days of autumn, about November 1st, so that the sap is collected in descending. The wild date palm and the nipa palm are richest producers, the juice of which averages 10 to 12% sugar. With the maturing of the date, much of the sugar of the sap becomes fixed in the fruit. Raw date sugar deteriorates more readily and more rapidly than raw cane sugar, but when refined, it is equally stable. The deterioration of the raw product is largely due to the presence of a higher percentage of gluten before refining. The sap of many trees contains sweets, which are not sugars. The most abundant and conspicuous of these is mannite, which occurs in the larch, apple, cherry, lime, different species of ash, eucalyptus, and camel's thorn. Chemically, mannite is an alcohol, which by oxidation passes into several sugars. The manna of commerce is obtained elusively from the ash, Fraxinus ornus, by slitting the bark with the point of a knife, through which the sap exudes so slowly as to give time for the evaporation of the water. Manna contains 60 to 90% of mannite, and in addition, glucose, resin, and mucilage. According to the biblical record, manna constituted the food of the Israelites in their journey through the wilderness of Arabia. This was probably obtained from the tamarix tree, Tamarix manifera, which exudes manna abundantly as a result of the infesting of a scale insect, Gossyparia manipara. There is also a lichen common on the Arabian deserts which exudes manna and may have been an additional source. There are some insects, chiefly aphids, which secrete from a pore in the back a sweet substance resembling in taste the exudations of many of the above-mentioned trees and shrubs. During the first 2 centuries of American history, the sugar maple, Acer saccharinum, was an important source of sugar and molasses, and there is still an annual production of more than 5,000 tons in the states east of the Mississippi River. There are many species of maple in Eastern Asia, Europe, and the United States. The species indigenous to the United States are as follows: sugar, silver, black, red, striped, and mountain maples in the states east of the Mississippi River, and Oregon maple and vine maple in the Rocky Mountains and Pacific Coast states. Of these, the sugar and black maples are richest in sugar and are the only species utilized extensively in the production of sugar and syrup. These products are obtained by evaporating the sap to different stages. The trees are tapped at the beginning of the spring thaw. As the sap flow increases, the proportion of sugar decreases, which is further lowered by the blooming of the tree, since the flowers of the maple are rich in nectar. The method and distribution of production will be discussed in a later chapter. All fruits contain 2 or more sugars, of which cane sugar, fruit sugar, and grape sugar are the most important. Cane sugar has 2 1/2 times the sweetening power of grape sugar and fruit sugar, which are known as invert or reducing sugars because of the readiness with which cane sugar is converted into grape sugar and fruit sugar to the action of an acid, heat, or ferment. Grape sugar can be prepared cheaply by boiling cornstarch in dilute sulfuric acid and neutralizing it with lime. Because of its cheapness, about 1/2 the cost of cane sugar, it has been used to adulterate the light brown varieties of cane sugar and is used extensively in the manufacture of table syrups, candies, and artificial honey. All soft candies and a large proportion of stick candies and caramels are made chiefly of starch sugar. Syrups. Fruit sugar is easily assimilated, has more sweetening power than grape sugar, but less than cane sugar, and is less susceptible to fermentation than grape sugar, dextrose. Of the American fruits, the apple and pineapple are richest in sugar. The pineapple has 13.3% sugar, of which 11.3% is cane sugar. The apple has given as high as 14% sugar in the fresh fruit. Pears give as much as 9% sugar, while peaches seldom contain more than 2% of the small fruits. Strawberries lead with an average total sugar content of 11.3%, and raspberries are second with an average of 7 to 8%. Although cane sugar ferments readily in dilute solutions, it has strong antiseptic properties in concentrated form, as is demonstrated by the stability of dried and preserved fruit. During the past century, the sugar beet has forged its way from an experimental beginning to first place among the sugar-producing plants. When Marggraf began his experiments in 1747, he was only able to extract 1.5% sugar, and 50 years later his pupil, Achard, who erected the first beet sugar factory, was unable to extract more than 3% sugar. The sugar of the beet is sucrose, or cane sugar, and refined beet sugar differs neither chemically nor physically from refined cane sugar. The manufacture of sugar in the beet is affected in the leaves, which draw their food supply from the air and from the roots. The chlorophyll, or green coloring matter of the leaf, is the stimulating agency for the assimilation of carbonic acid in the protoplasmic cells. The carbonic acid is derived from the air, and the water is supplied chiefly through the roots. The sugar is transferred from the leaves through the veins and stems to the root, where it is stored for future use in maturing the seed. The amount of sugar has been steadily increased in the beet by seed selection, improved cultivation, and geographic distribution. When Napoleon started his investigations on the possible domestic sources of sugar, the maximum sugar content of beets was 6%. Now beets running below 12% in sugar are not considered a profitable source for manufacture, and crops have been harvested in recent years in the arid states which contained as high as 23%. The high sugar content in irrigated regions is produced by the maximum sunshine and the judicious distribution of water during the growing and maturing season. The presence of requisite mineral matter is also of paramount importance, potash being the most important. The potash is not assimilated but stimulates the transfer of energy, and as a basic mineral causes the condensation of formaldehyde into sugar and starch. The lower the sugar content, the higher will be the percentage of the lower the sugar content, the higher will be the percentage of ash. The following mineral elements occur in varying quantities in the roots and leaves of the beet plant: potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, chlorine, phosphorus, and sulfur. The sugar beet is distinctly a temperate zone plant with an approximate limit of 32 degrees to 45 degrees north and south latitude. Sugar and syrup have been manufactured in the United States in limited quantities from watermelons. The juice is comparatively free of those non-saccharine elements which make the extraction of sugar difficult. The sugar content varies from 5 to 7% and crystallizes with difficulty. 8 gallons of melon juice yield 1 gallon of superior syrup. The increased demand for melons since the introduction of refrigerator transportation and storage has foreclosed the possibility of exploiting commercially the source of sugar and syrup. Sugar is manufactured from raisins in practically all the countries of Southern Europe and Western Asia. There are 2 forms of raisin sugar imported into New York. The one from Syria, Asia Minor, and Turkey, and the other from Spain. That from the Levantine countries is said to be consumed by 250,000 Arabic-speaking people. In this That from the Levantine countries is said to be consumed by 250,000 Arabic-speaking people in the cities of the Atlantic seaboard, who prize this syrupy sugar very highly as a coffee sweetener. The Turks add to the delicacy of the sweets by the use of a few drops. The Turks! The Turks add to the delicacy of the sweet by the use of a few drops of rose water. The crystallized raisin sugar is made in Spain, where it constitutes one of the common domestic products of the small farm. Small quantities are imported into the United States by immigrants from the Iberian Peninsula. The milk of mammals contains 4 to 7% of milk sugar, lactose, which differs but slightly from cane sugar chemically. It is obtained by evaporating the whey after removing the curd from the manufacture of cheese. Very little is manufactured in this country since its use is limited to therapeutic purposes. Pure milk sugar is not affected by yeast, but milk is capable of alcoholic fermentation. Mare's milk is used extensively in Russia and in the countries of Western Asia for the manufacture of the alcoholic drinks, kumis and kefir. Honey has been used as a food since prehistoric times. In fact, it was the only concentrated table sweet prior to the separation of sugar from sugar-producing plants. It is very rich in carbohydrates, but contains only a small percentage of cane sugar. The most abundant are the invert sugars, fruit sugar, and grape sugar. The chemical composition of honey varies more widely than any other natural source of sugar, since it is determined almost exclusively by the food sources accessible to the bees. Honeys are of two general types, floral and honeydew, and these seldom show the same analysis in different localities. The sugars of honey constitute about 80% by weight and water 15 to 18%. The honeydew honeys, which are elaborated from the secretion of insects, usually contain a larger percentage of cane sugar than the honey from flowers. In the United States, 50% of the honey produced is used in the baking and confectionery trade. The value of honey in the manufacture of baked stuffs and candies is determined by its property of imparting a texture and degree of moisture which cannot be produced by other sugars. Early history of sugar. Sugar was first prepared either from sugar cane or the bamboo, both of which belong to the same family. Students of the subject have differed in their conclusions as to where sugar cane was first cultivated, and no definite conclusion has yet been reached as to when sugar was first prepared. Karl Ritter, the great German scientist, is accepted as high authority in his research investigations on ancient industries. He affirms that the cultivation of sugar cane was limited to Bengal until the 5th century AD and that it was native to that part of India. About the 5th century, it was introduced into the Tigris Valley near the city Jandisapur and was soon introduced into the Euphrates Valley. Sugarcane was carried into China at a very early date and has been cultivated in that empire continuously since its introduction. The Grecian and Roman historians refer to the cultivation of sugarcane in western India. The earliest historical records seem to indicate that sugar was obtained in India from the bamboo prior to its separation from the sugarcane. Theophrastus refers to the product as honey, which is from bamboos. Paulos Egineta refers to the same commodity as Indian salt. Seneca makes the observation there is found among the Indians a honey contained in the reed, and Pliny tells us Arabia produces sugar, but that of India is more renowned. This saccharine substance, whether it was obtained solely from the bamboo or from both the bamboo and the sugarcane, was not used as a food for many centuries, but was prized highly as a medicine. This is the origin of the ancient proverb, like an apothecary without sugar, which is still used by the Spanish. There is abundant evidence to prove that by the 10th century, sugar was manufactured in the valleys of the Tigris and the Euphrates in sufficient quantities to attract the attention of the traders of other countries. It had ceased to be construed as only possessing medicinal properties and had gradually gained in popularity as a delicious food luxury to be indulged in during special feasts. Sugarcane plants were carried from Arabia into Nubia, Ethiopia, and Egypt, and were first introduced into Europe by the Moors in the 8th century. Until the 13th century, the cultivation was restricted to Spain, at which time it was introduced into Cyprus and Sicily. Prior to the introduction of sugarcane into Europe, honey was the most common saccharine in use and was recognized as the standard of sweetness. Sugar proved to be a sweet of far greater utility because of the ease with which it could be produced, transported, exchanged, and preserved. It was also incomparably better adapted to the art of cooking. The cultivation of sugarcane became an important industry in Sicily by the 15th century. It was in this century that the King of Portugal sent cane cuttings from Sicily for planting in Madeira and Canary Island. In the Madeira and Canary Islands, the industry so flourished that Europe, during the succeeding 200 years, drew her sugar supply chiefly from these islands. From the Canary Islands, sugarcane was introduced into Brazil early in the 16th century, and about the same time the cultivation began to assume importance in the island of San Domingo. The intensity with which the industry was exploited in San Domingo may be judged from the fact that in 1518 there were 28 sucreries in the island. From San Domingo, the cultivation spread successively to Mexico, 1520, Guadalupe, 1644, and Martinique, 1650. Sugarcane was not introduced into the American colonies until 1751, during which year the Jesuit fathers of San Domingo sent the Jesuits of Louisiana sugarcane for planting, and also sent Negroes who were accustomed to the cultivation of the plant in their native islands. The cane grew luxuriantly, but the growers were unsuccessful in converting it into sugar. After years of continuous effort and repeated failures, the project was abandoned in 1776 and was not resumed until 1791. During this year, Don Antonio Mendez succeeded in manufacturing sugar for the first time in Louisiana, and this was easily accomplished by securing the services of a sugar maker from Cuba. In 1794, Etienne de Boer was so successful in the manufacture of his crop that several sugar houses were erected in southern Louisiana. The first cane cultivated in North America was the Creole variety, which was followed by the Tahiti variety. Neither of these was adapted to the soil and climate of the Gulf Coast. Early in the 19th century, the purple or ribbon cane was planted in Georgia and grew so satisfactorily that in 1820, John Quiron introduced it into Louisiana. This gave a new impulse to the cultivation of cane in Louisiana, and in reality marks the commercial beginning of the sugar industry in the United States. The purple canes rapidly spread through the state and proved so well adapted that they have continued in general use.